He was once a decorated Spokane police officer, a top contender to be the next police chief. Now Karl Thompson is headed to federal prison. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nadine Woodward. Mike will join us in just a minute. First, today's decision. Just about an hour ago, federal judge Fred Van Sickle sentenced former Spokane police officer Karl Thompson to 51 months in prison. That's a little over 4 years, and now he is going directly to jail. We have in-depth coverage of today's sentencing and what comes next for Karl Thompson and our community. Mike Gonzalez is live at the federal building downtown with our team of reporters covering this case. Mike?
Nadine, good evening. Obviously an emotional day here at the federal courthouse where there are no cameras allowed inside, but our reporters have been covering this case. Jeff Humphrey joins me now. Jeff, you've been covering this case for 6 years now. We hope that it lends some closure. What happened in the courtroom today?
Well, it was really a bad day in court for Karl Thompson's defense team, because when he came here to the federal building this morning, Karl Thompson was looking at no more than 2 to 2.5 years in prison. That because of a U.S. Probation Department recommendation that he get that. That's the same outfit that works for the Department of Justice. But U.S. attorneys here argued that they had calculated that level score incorrectly and spent the majority of the day saying that no, that calculation is based on what a simple assault is, and that's just a weapon displayed to create fear in someone. The United States was able to prove today that no, that actually this was an aggravated assault times 13 the number of times that Karl Thompson hit Otto Zehm. And so at that point, Karl Thompson was looking at anywhere from 9 to 10 years, and it looked really bad for Karl Thompson at that point. However, then the judge took in the defense's argument and consideration of this was an anomaly for Karl Thompson, that he had lived an exemplary life up until that point. He has been decorated many times for saving people's lives in many places. Karl Thompson told the court himself that Otto Zehm's death was the opposite of what he's dedicated his entire life to, and that really registered with the judge, because the judge then did what he called a variation of the sentence and dropped down what could have been a 135-month sentence. He cut it in half to 51. And so here's what Mike Ormsby said about this being a victory for the community, but also a victory for Otto Zehm's family.
And Jeff, it seemed like it was a difficult decision for Van Sickle. Are we going in sound now?
I would be remiss if before we went on I didn't make note of Otto Zehm. And today a portion, and probably not enough time, he was the victim of this unfortunate circumstance, but a portion of the hearing today was devoted to the kind of person that Otto Zehm was, what his life meant to those around him who loved him, particularly his mom. And it's a tragedy that he left us all too soon, and this case in part was to bring justice to him and to his family.
And this clear-cut victory for the United States almost cut short by the fact that after the sentence was passed, Karl Thompson's attorney asked the judge to allow his client to remain free on appeal, and went back and forth, but in the end, the United States won, saying, you know what, you're going to sentence him to 51 months in prison, but he's not going to go to jail today. Every other person in this city would go to jail today. Let's send him to jail. The judge agreed, and so now Thompson, on his way, actually is in the custody of the U.S. Marshals.
And I was going to get to it before the soundbite. Judge Van Sickle, it seemed like he was somewhat emotional. We were reading into the tweets about, you know, his thought process in the sentencing.
He is just a very careful and deliberate judge. This case has consumed his life for the past 2.5 years. All the attorneys involved. Judge Van Sickle, this is probably his very last case in his long career as a federal judge. I think that judges want to see that they make sure that their trials are not overturned further on in the Court of Appeals, and so he took that extra year, even after Thompson was convicted by a jury, to look at all the possible appeal avenues that could be launched. He reviewed all of those, and then more recently said, no, the conviction stands, and we moved in our sentencing today. I wouldn't call the judge emotional. I would just think he's very aware of what he is doing to Karl Thompson, how this is affecting our community, and I think he made a very careful decision today.
Certainly meticulous. Okay, here we are 6 years later, Jeff. What's next for Karl Thompson? What happens to him right now at this point?
Well, he was let out of the courtroom this evening by U.S. Marshals in handcuffs, and he's going to be taken to an undisclosed facility. He is headed toward a U.S. prison somewhere. It's up to the Bureau of Prisons to decide, but we think based on his sentence, he is not going to the detention center in SeaTac. He is more likely going to a federal prison in Sheridan, Oregon. That's about 60 miles away from Portland. But until the U.S. Marshals take him there, he could be put up in one of our local jails. We talked about the possibility of him being held tonight in the Spokane County Jail in an isolation cell. And if that process is occurring, he'll be fingerprinted. They'll take away the suit he had on in court. They'll put him in a jail jumpsuit, and then he'll be locked up there in 6 East so that when he is out, no other inmates have access to him. And then it's up to the U.S. Marshals to decide when they want to take him to that prison. The Bureau of Prisons in Grand Prairie, Texas actually makes that decision. And given that he is kind of a security risk from the standpoint that other people here in town might want to try to hurt him because he's arrested so many criminals over the years, I don't expect him to be here in Spokane very long. In fact, they could use an outlying county. They could be on his way to Whitman County right now, or perhaps in Kootenai County.
Before I let you go, Jeff, I want to talk about that appeals process real quick. Is there a chance he could appeal and get out of prison at this point?
We know for sure that he's going to appeal because his attorney was arguing that he remain free while he launches that appeal. He has 14 days to file that appeal. There are 1,100 different motions in this whole case, and so there's a lot of places where the court could have made a trial error, and I know Mr. Rescovich, he intends to appeal this on the behalf of his client, Karl Thompson, but he is absolutely going to be in prison until that appeal is adjudicated.
All right, Jeff, I know it's been a long day for you. Appreciate your help on this case, and obviously we hope this can bring a little bit of closure. Here we are 6 years later. I'm going to bring in Colleen O'Brien. She's been talking to the family for actually several years now as we've followed this case. You talked to them today. What's their emotional state coming into today?
Very emotional, almost too much to talk to us today. As you can imagine, this is the day they've been waiting for since 2006 when this initial confrontation happened. So they were almost too emotional, too overcome with just anticipation to see what this sentence would come down to be, to talk to us. But we did hear a very brief statement from Dale and Sandy Zehm, the cousins of Otto Zehm, during the victim impact statement. I've been tweeting this all day, live tweeting the court. Dale saying he continues to struggle each day. Now at sentencing, it should be known that Otto Zehm was innocent. Thompson's actions resulted in a brutal, unnecessary death, and that he has never, ever gotten a sorry or seen any sort of remorse from Karl Thompson, and they resented that about this case. Other victims that spoke, a friend and co-worker of Otto Zehm, the mother looked directly at Karl Thompson and said, "Shame on you for taking my daughter's friend away from her," indicating that her daughter has had to go on antidepressants due to Otto Zehm's death. Another victim impact statement was from a counselor, a supervisor of Zehm, when he was working as a janitor, and she began to cry as she thought about, everybody described Otto Zehm as a very sweet, gentle, and loving man. So we heard very, very powerful victim impact statements today. Now, as far as the family after the sentencing, I watched as the sentence came down for 51 months. They sat stoically and watched and listened. There was no sign of emotion, no sign of relief or crying. It was just what it was. So we do wait to hear from them. They were in a press conference shortly after the sentencing. After I came out here, I know we did get statements from them on camera. So we'll have to wait and see what they thought after the sentencing.
Now, folks, cameras are not allowed in federal court, but Karl Thompson actually did address the Zehm family. What did he have to say to them?
He did. It was a very brief statement. It wasn't written on paper. It was all from what he had maybe rehearsed or what he wanted to say off the top of his head. He said that he lives with Otto Zehm every day, that he said he is sorry for what transpired, that he does take responsibility for what happened. Again, very brief, but he did ask the judge, should I address the family or you? And the judge said, please address me, but you can speak to the family. So he didn't say it directly to the family, but the entire statement from Karl Thompson was to the family and nobody else.
What was his reaction when the sentence came down?
Absolutely nothing. Whatever was going through his head was kept to himself. He also remained stoic. When the judge asked him if he understood his sentence, he just said, yes, I do. However, the family of Karl Thompson was in tears immediately. There were no outbursts. There was no crying outwardly, but a family of Karl Thompson were crying to each other back in the benches as they watched. So a very emotional day for them.
All right, before I let you go, Colleen, what do you got coming up for us at 6:30 and 11 tonight?
At 6:30, just after the sentencing, and this is interesting because the defense did use this as part of evidence in the sentencing, or not the defense, excuse me, the prosecution. They showed surveillance video of two young girls who witnessed the confrontation between Karl Thompson and Otto Zehm to demonstrate that even though you can't hear Otto Zehm screaming, the reaction from the young girls covering their ears and cowering, and the older sister trying to protect the younger sister from seeing what was transpiring, they were in that video, and it was shown as an impact video for sentencing. They were here today, 6 years later. They say they suffer from awful nightmares. They have trouble trusting police officers. So I spoke with them right after sentencing, and they had some interesting things to say about the 51 months that Karl Thompson is sentenced to.
All right, Colleen, thanks so much. Thank you for your tweeting all day long. We've been following you. Colleen O'Brien reporting live for us there. You know, some people in the community, they wanted more than 51 months for Karl Thompson. Some even wanted life in prison for him, but he wasn't charged. What we're going to tell you is what he was actually charged with. He was convicted of 2 counts, willfully depriving Otto Zehm of his constitutional right to be free from unreasonable force, and the charge of making a false entry in a record or document with the intent to impede or obstruct an investigation. He was never charged with the murder of Otto Zehm. That's what I was trying to say. He was absolutely never charged with the murder of Otto Zehm or with causing Zehm's death. Nadine, obviously this case is going to have lasting effects. You can see the emotional fallout from all sides, whether you're a supporter of Karl Thompson or you feel for the Otto Zehm family. Certainly it's going to still take a lot of healing. Again, Karl Thompson, he receives 51 months from federal judge. And right now he is on his way to the Spokane County Jail. We will certainly keep you updated throughout this newscast tonight on KXLY4 HC News at 6:30 and 11. I'm Mike Gonzalez reporting live from the federal courthouse. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. And on that subject of healing, Spokane Mayor David Condon just releasing this statement that reads, in part, "Our focus remains on continuing to improve public trust and confidence in the Spokane Police Department and its officers." And he ends it by saying, and finally, to Ann Zehm, that is Otto Zehm's mother, and to the many family and friends of Mr. Otto Zehm, I am hopeful that this decision brings you peace.